my name is Stephanie Toddy, and I'd like to welcome everyone to our webinar today entitled The Value Add of Outcome Measures, Processes, and Tools Used for Assessing Student, Course Module, and Program Effectiveness, presented by Dr. Gregory Hawkins, Executive Director for Academic Effectiveness, Assessment, and Accreditation, Dr. Ryan Otto, Program and Institutional Effectiveness Manager, and Mr. Nicholas Keely, Student Testing and Assessment Manager, all of the University of South Carolina School of Medicine, Greenville. Before we start, just a couple of housekeeping items. If you have specific questions throughout the webinar, we encourage everyone to type them through the questions feature of the webinar, the questions feature of the GoToWebinar control panel, which should be on the right-hand side of your screen. You can type those in at any time, and we will have a chance to answer all questions at the conclusion of the presentation. Also, at the conclusion of the webinar, you should have a quick survey pop up for you. We encourage everyone to fill the survey out if possible so that we can continue to provide relevant content at all of our presentations. There's only 5 questions, and it would be really great if everybody could do that. We would also like everybody to know that we have an upcoming webinar on Thursday, August 14th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time entitled Using Learner Data for Curricular Quality Improvement, hosted by Dr. Sherry Jimenez, Assistant Dean for Educational Development from the Marian University College of Osteopathic Medicine. To register for this webinar or for any of our other upcoming presentations, you can visit us at learn.examsoft.com/resources, or to stay up to date with all of our events, you can follow us on LinkedIn or Twitter. And because I know everyone will ask, yes, this presentation is being recorded, and we'll be sending it out to all registrants when you receive it. In the next day or so, please feel free to share it with any of your peers or colleagues. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Dr. Hawkins and our presenters. Thank you so much for attending, and please enjoy the webinar.
Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Again, my name is Greg Hawkins. I work at the University of South Carolina School of Medicine, Greenville, and with me are Dr. Ryan Otto and Mr. Nicholas Keely. If in the course of today's webinar we share with you any sample materials and you would like to receive a copy of the materials, please do feel free to contact us and we'll be happy to help you. And I'm trying to advance the slide.
You should just have to push the forward arrow button. Or enter. All right, hold on, let me check. You guys have your GoToWebinar control. There you go. Now you should be good.
Okay, there we go. Thank you, Stephanie. Well, if any of you have gone through accreditation, you know the demands of answering the many questions and requests for materials and sample student learning outcomes and sample learning artifacts. We just 2 weeks ago went through our provisional accreditation review with the LCME, and I can tell you that when they ask for a specific material or a specific sample, you have matters of hours to get that to them. So having systems in place that allow you to do that rather than scrambling or recreate information is always super advantageous. And also, I think depending upon your organizational culture, you may be forced to make decisions based upon your internal expertise or consultants, which is often a function of your entrenched practices or your status quo operations, rather than truly relying upon rigorous data to make your decisions. So I hope among the things we do today is describe for you our approach here at the School of Medicine, Greenville, and share with you our model for planning, implementing, and evaluating our assessment practices. We also hope to show you and share with you some of our tools that we use, which are basically functions of the ExamSoft testing system, but also the Weave online assessment management systems, which combined for us really provide a very strong, very robust set of tools for capturing outcomes from the student level to the course and module level, and ultimately allow us to answer key questions about our program effectiveness. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Otto to give you a description of our assessment planning process.
Sure. Thanks, Greg. A couple of the key features and just a general overview of our planning process in general. We've listed out a couple of key bullet points that we identified. First of all, the process is vetted, it's transparent, it's very process-driven planning. And it's vetted in the sense that all the modules that participate or that own that part of the curriculum guide the decision-making process. They're crafting the student learning outcomes. They're all involved in that process. It's transparent from the sense that all of our faculty have the opportunity to review each other's planning for their courses, for their modules. So it's very transparent about how things are done and about who's doing what, who owns what parts of the curriculum. And then, of course, it's very process-driven. There's very clear expectations, very clear timelines about how things are done and when they are to occur. So we always try to emphasize the SMART objectives, and I'm sure you guys are familiar with the acronym, the SMART acronym, that all of our objectives are specific, they're measurable, they're achievable, they're relevant, and they're time referenced. And of course that relevance piece becomes very important to us, and as we talk through this process today, you see without relevance at each of the key levels, the whole thing kind of falls apart. And so we want to make sure that obviously our student learning outcomes are relevant at the course level, at the module level, but that they also have relevance for the overall academic year, and then that they're tied in and mapped back specifically to our program level objectives, so they have relevance at that level as well. And as you see kind of through the presentation, how creating relevance at those different levels is really one of the keys to success with this. And of course the last piece, we're primarily talking about planning today, but one thing that happens at the end of the execution process is that any items that are unmet, any student learning outcomes that are unmet or unachieved, faculty are asked to create an action plan for that in the next iteration. So as they're planning for the current year, they're looking back to the action plans from the previous year so they can see maybe what they had learned, what things were experienced or possibilities for improvement. So as we look kind of through our system that we use to house all this information and store this and be able to draw on it is Weave online. And the way the structure is set up in there is basically that what Weave defines as an entity has each one of these components, has a mission, goals, objectives, measures, achievement targets, and then action plans. And so you see here we've got structure and function of the human body. That's one of our first year medical student courses. It's the first part of our anatomy course. And what we've done here is use this course as an example for it. And we use the entity system in Weave for our courses. So each course has these 6 components listed out underneath it. So here's kind of a sample snapshot real quick of what that structure looks like within Weave. If you see here at the top, we've got the different goals listed out for this particular course for the Structure and Function 1 module. And then below that, you can see the outcomes and objectives, the student learning outcomes, and of course, out to the side there in parentheses in blue, you can see that the student learning outcome number 2 is mapped back to goal number 2, which is our overall medical knowledge goal that is a thread throughout our curriculum and of course in our first year for medical students. This next slide shows you a little bit more in-depth kind of detail. So we've shown you the goals, the student learning outcomes, and this is going to be actually one of the measures that's used to determine and establish to what degree or to what extent students have actually achieved or accomplished the student learning outcome. So our summative exams are one of our key measures that we use. And then you can see there in the blue, the summative exams are measures mapped back to student learning outcome 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So again, our summative exam process, as you'll see throughout this presentation, is one of our key measures to determine student progress. And so then down there at the bottom, you can see with every measure, so if the summative exam is labeled as a measure, every measure has a target, and the target is simply how we think students are going to perform based on what we know about the curriculum and based on what we know about past performance with students. And then our finding is going to be actually what happens. And then the finding is going to be labeled as it either met the target or the target was unmet. And then we're able to move into the next iteration of the course of the module with some very informed, very good information and good data. All right, so you can see here just an example. Again, we've got the target, and this is a good example of where a target was not met. They had set the target that 80% of the structure function 1 module students will achieve a minimum of 70% or higher on exam items, mapped to objective 5. And as you'll see later on in the presentation, we're able to then draw that data out and look extensively how students performed on a particular objective, not just a particular question or on the exam as a whole, but by objective. So you can see here that 47% of the structure function students achieved 70%, so we failed to meet that one there. That objective was not met. And so then the faculty member was asked to create an action plan for that for the next iteration of the module. And if we were able to click on that blue link there, it would actually give us the faculty narrative and the faculty rationale for the action that needs to be taken moving forward. So this is just kind of a general overview of how that then looks once it's built out into the system in a tiered kind of structure. And this is where the relevance really comes into play with how we build our curriculum, how we build our assessment process. So you can see there the goal of medical knowledge then maps down to the student learning outcome. And below that, you can see how that student learning outcome then relates and applies to our overall program level objectives, which are the driving factors in our curriculum. So we're able then, with this extensive kind of mapping, we're able to see, for example, medical knowledge 1, we're able to see everywhere in the curriculum where medical knowledge 1 is addressed. And then, of course, how it was measured, what the target was, and ultimately what the student learning outcome was. And we're able to make modifications based on that. So that's just kind of a general overview of how we structured the planning process and how we map those things to create some relevance.
The other thing I'd like to add to Dr. Otto's description is with every finding, we also have the capacity with our document repository to actually upload into the same system the evidence of that student learning outcome. So again, if we're ever asked to demonstrate or to show how we measure these outcomes and what we use to measure them, it's all contained within this one centralized system. Okay, Mr. Keely is going to talk with us about S.M.A.R.T implementation.
And as Dr. Otto was saying, one of our main measures for these student learning outcomes and our goals when we do the planning is summative exams, but we also do formative exams for our students too, and both of these are housed in ExamSoft. But once we've gone through the planning process with the module faculty and to finalize their objectives and the curriculum and the order in which they're going to deliver it, we build this form right here to allow us to map to all the particular categories that we need for not only to report back to LCME, but also it gives the students an idea of where they struggle or where they excel. As far as you can see the organ systems, are they very good in cardiovascular or are they better in renal? But we have the faculty, each question that we build into ExamSoft has to go on this form, and the faculty also get together and vet each item so then they can see if it's appropriately mapped to each category as well before it's submitted to our office. And as you can see, I know some of you use ExamSoft and everybody uses it, I'm sure, differently. But once we get the items on that form, we build each item into ExamSoft like I was saying, and it makes it very convenient for us to see where in this module did we teach something on cardiovascular and how did we assess it. Was it formative or was it summative feedback, and what objectives did we map to? So with ExamSoft, we can go in and search by each category, and it'll pull up each question so we can report back to not only the faculty members but LCME as well. And this is one good piece that we use as well, as far as we can generate this report through ExamSoft, and we use this not only for our summative exams but also for the formative exams, and it'll generate your low scores, your high scores, your KR20, which will help as far as reliability, and the histogram as well, so you can see what kind of curve you have and how things are playing out in that particular exam. And this is also a part of the same report. Here we go. This is also part of the same category report, and you can see it'll list your at-risk students, which is very big for us, so then we can intervene at appropriate times to help students see what they need to work on and prepare, not only for step one, but within that module. If it's on a formative exam, we can intervene and they can focus more on particular topics before it's the summative exam. If we don't have this tool, there's not a way for us to intervene, and by the time they take the summative exam, it's too late. And right here too, we give each student this report on their summative exams, so this allows them to prepare for the next module as well as their step one board exams, and it'll show how they perform on each organ system, how they test as far as the cognitive level, which objectives do they struggle on more so than others. This just allows them to prepare and know after the first year, what do I need to focus on over the summer to prepare for the next year in step one.
Okay, and as far as the administrative value add goes, I can tell you as a new program, we just started our third class of students this week, as a matter of fact. For the first couple of years, we have black baselines against which we can measure our progress. With the absence of those baselines, in these first few years, we have tracked everything. This is just a quick glimpse of the metadata set we maintain. Contains about 400 variables that we maintain for every student. So everything that they've done since our charter class arrived, we have captured data about that. Everything from their pre-matriculation data, such as their undergraduate GPA, their MCAT scores and sub-scores, etc., on down the line to every formative assessment that we put them through, every summative assessment, every competencies assessment. And for us, this has proven to be an extremely valuable tool. And the only way that we've been able to effectively and efficiently pull this data set together is because ExamSoft is so effective with its data exportability. So we're able to pull any result from ExamSoft and very quickly get it into this data set for further analyses. This does also allow me to do bi-weekly potential at-risk assessments on our students as they're within modules, as we use our formative exam results to predict our summative exam results. Having this all in one data set allows us to do that very well. So now, with 2 years of data in and our first set of step one scores in, we've been able to produce a fairly effective step one prediction model. Again, a very important value-added contribution from our model and our systems. Again, this represents what we know from pre-matriculation. By the time our students have gone through their third module, we're able to predict, with this model explains, almost 60% of the variation in step one scores with a fairly modest standard error of the estimate. And by the end of year one, the model improves to almost 70% of the variation explained and a reduced standard error. And again, as we go through 2 years of assessment with our students, our picture becomes much clearer. And by the time they finish the second year with us, we can explain about 80% of the variation in student performance on step one with an even lower standard error of the estimate. So for us, this becomes a great tool. Rather than doing an autopsy after the fact when it's too late to do anything about it, we're able to diagnose and provide a prognosis for our students about where they stand and hone in on possible effective interventions with the students. As Nick showed you before, every student receives a version of this report, but likewise, we provide the same report at the module level. Again, it maps to the same types of categories. Our cognitive level, are we asking enough higher order questions? If so, how are our students performing on them? It also maps back again to each module level objective. Are we sufficiently assessing on these module objectives? This is an example of where the module only used one summative exam question to measure student learning outcomes relative to Objective 6. Well, that's insufficient. So again, that helps us with a type of formative feedback for the module so they can improve in subsequent years. But again, we also map back to module week, how that week's content was assessed and student success with that content. So just as the students receive formative feedback, we also use many of these same data points to provide formative feedback to the modules. I mentioned before our use of data. One of the great features, again, of ExamSoft is we use the testing system to use formative items, which are, in a sense, parallel types of questions to be found on the summative exam, for which the students receive their grades. Well, we use the results from the formatives to predict student success on the summative, and so therefore we would expect all of the formative exams to correlate in a significant manner with the summative exam scores. So for this one particular module, we found that in week 2, that week's formative exam was not correlated, so we asked the module to take a look at both their content and their assessments, formative and summative, to improve in that particular week. So again, that's an important administrative value for us. And then finally, Dr. Otto showed you examples of assessment planning at the module level. But again, one of the key things we have to answer to is how well the program as a whole is performing relative to our program level objectives. So this is an example of a report that we're able to run out of Weave Online using the data that we collect through ExamSoft to demonstrate student learning and student performance relative to each of our program level objectives. So just as an example, for our first of 43 program level objectives, demonstrate knowledge of the normal structure and function of the body and each of its major organ systems, we have 62 objectives that appear throughout the Year 1 and Year 2 modules that address this particular program level objective. So with our Weave Online system, we're able to then generate every instance of implementation of these objectives, not only where it appears, in this case our cardiovascular and pulmonary module, but what the objectives were in that module, what the measure was, and what the findings were. And again, this is just a quick snapshot, but for all our modules, we want to know where they're touching on the program level objectives and how those modules are demonstrating relevance to our program level priorities. And then finally, one of the key features we have with this also, we can take a look at our entire program and we can take a look at every module using test item performance statistics. Again, how many items were used in the overall program and by each academic year. We have the same information for each module. We have the same information for each faculty member. So we're going to look at their item performance, the mean point by serial, the mean difficulty index. We track the percentage of items that are turned in late. And by being able to do this, we've been able to demonstrate for our faculty that as they approach and then surpass the test item submission deadline, the item becomes twice as likely to have a flaw that results in it being thrown off the exam. So again, it's very compelling evidence to use with faculty. And again, the percentage of items performing at or above our recommended point by serial. And on the other end of the spectrum, and this was a direct question from the LCME, what do you do with items that are too easy? If you throw out the overly hard and the flawed, what do you do if you have too many items that are gimme, in this case defined as easy items defined as 95% or more of the students got it right, and the gimme items, which meant 100% of the students got the item right. So again, with the two systems, we're able to really pull some very robust and rich information to guide student learning, to guide module improvement, and to monitor our program effectiveness. And I mentioned before some of the pains and the stress of your accreditation visit. During our accreditation visit, we were asked to produce evidence of where acid base and smooth muscle appeared within our curriculum. Well, again, with our mapping, our extensive mapping in ExamSoft and through our Weave system, we were able to produce an exhaustive list of every instance of where this topic appeared, during which module and which module week, and we even have all our ID numbers for test items that we use to assess for the smooth muscle topic. So again, being able to produce that within not hours or days, but within minutes was an extreme advantage for us. It was highly impressive to the LCME site visitors and was cited as a strength for the institution. So again, just to touch on some of the major points we wanted to address with you today. For us, again, we recognize the tremendous advantage of having this depth and breadth of data available to us in a very manageable, very accessible format. And for us, again, we found that the two systems we rely on extremely heavily, ExamSoft and Weave, to be very complementary in the sense of it allows us to drill down as deeply as we want at that student level, to provide them feedback, to provide the program and the modules feedback, and then to use Weave Online as a housing system where all these data points converge, again, in a very accessible, very mineable place. A couple of cautionary points. In a way, we are advantaged because we are a brand new program, so we're not fighting through the pains of a paradigm shift. We were able to create this from the start. So, in considering moving towards different systems and different practices, there is always that clinging to the status quo. But again, in our experience, and I've worked at 3 institutions that used Weave. This is my first institution that uses ExamSoft. This is the most robust assessment model and process I've ever used. The last cautionary tale is, regardless of the tool you choose to buy, it truly is, the value of the tool is going to be a function of your sophistication, your capacity, and the organization's culture. We spend tremendous amounts of time working with faculty and staff to train them in assessment models and why we believe that our model is effective. We spend tremendous amounts of time training them how to use the various systems and how to interpret the results of the system. But the bottom line for us is, without the value proposition to the faculty members and to the administrative leadership, none of these systems would be overly helpful to you. You've got to establish the value proposition, how these outcomes are going to be beneficial to the end users. So Stephanie, with that, we'll turn it back to you and welcome any questions the participants may have.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. Again, if anybody has any questions, now is the time to, pose them through the GoToWebinar control panel, which should be on the right-hand side of your screen under the questions area. If you go ahead and type in your questions there, we'll take a few here at the end of the session, and I'll go ahead and read them out. Looks like we already have a couple, so let's go ahead and take a look. The first question we have is, can you explain how the data from ExamSoft was compiled? Was this through the exam practice?
Yes, for the exam, the data collection, we collect that through ExamSoft. We're able to export student level results from ExamSoft, and the metadata set to which I referred earlier is an SPSS data set, an IBM SPSS data set. That is a statistical package for the social sciences. So there is a manual import into SPSS that we perform. But again, because of the ease of exporting from ExamSoft, it's just a couple clicks of a mouse to get it into one comprehensive centralized data set.
Wonderful, thank you. All right, the next question is, how does the exam process work? Is it all computer-based? And is it through a computer lab?
Mr. Keely, you want to answer this one?
All of our formative and summative exams via ExamSoft is primarily what we use. We do have another learning system which students use called Canvas, and those are for any other exams other than formative and summative feedback or exams. And what we do is we don't have a computer lab. Each student was issued, our past 2 years, each student was issued their own laptop, so they just download soft test on that and they use that. But for this year and the years forward, our IT department has bought, or they're going to purchase more. It's called a thin client, and all it has on it is the internet and soft test. So that way we don't have to worry about the secure versus non-secure. Students won't have access to anything whatsoever other than soft test.
And just to follow up on that, when we do use student computers for examinations, we do use the secure testing feature. So when they take their formative exams over the weekend, those are time constrained, so they have approximately 2 minutes per test item. Not enough time to actually break into their textbook and cheat. But when they're taking their exams at home or during an actual summative exam, we do use the secure feature, and they can't access any other functionality of their computer.
Wonderful, thank you. The next question we have is, do you use ExamSoft for formative and summative assessment of clinical skills?
That's a great question. We're just entering our clinical years now. Now in the M1 and M2 clinical modules, we do use ExamSoft for summative examination questions. But of course they do many other hands-on clinical skills, OSCE types of assessments for which ExamSoft is not appropriate. We don't use it for those purposes.
Perfect, thank you. Next question is, how hard was it to get all faculty members to use this process, or was the process mandated?
Well, our model of decision-making with some things is what I like to refer to as the benevolent dictatorship. Through careful examination of the options, it was decided by the executive leadership, the administrative leadership, that this was the correct system for us. And now, once the decision was made, we have worked with faculty on the implementation side of things, what works for them with test item development and submission, with examination processes. But as far as the platform for examinations, that decision was made before the vast majority of faculty even showed up. That said, we have had zero pushback against the use of the system. They all see tremendous value in the ease for the student, but also the quality and the quantity of feedback they can receive from the results.
Wonderful, thanks. Next question is, based on the results from your formative exams, how do you remediate, and how are the results reflected in the data?
Based upon the formative exams, we're pretty adept at isolating where the problem may be. I guess, again, that is going to be a function of the extent of your category mapping. Again, the way that we map back to the biomedical sciences, the primary and secondary disciplines, to the module weeks, and even now, as we move forward, we're going to be mapping back even into the actual session itself. Allows us to identify where the student lost traction or demonstrates relative weakness. So again, with each student receiving his or her own highly detailed post-formative and post-summative examination reports, we're able to work with them and provide targeted remediation at the individual level. We also have a post-formative exam review session in which faculty, even for the items that through item analyses were determined to be flawed or weak, the faculty go through explanation of the rationale for the items ranked from the hardest to the easiest. And we're now in our third year moving towards providing in advance rationale for correct responses for formatives and summative exams.
Great. Next question we have is, are all computer exams given at the same time, and did you have to come up with a broadband solution for that to be feasible?
All summative exams are given at the same time, and we've had no issues with broadband capacity. Formative exams, we provide a window of time. Again, it is a secure exam, but the students have some latitude at which point they begin their exam over the weekend. So summative exams, they do take at the same time, and we've experienced no broadband issues. Formatives, they have more latitude, and again, the broadband has not been any concern at all.
Great, thank you. Next question is, do you integrate feedback from the students regarding the learning activities in a similar way as the exam results?
Yes. Through the module and through module evaluations, we receive student feedback that we do use to help guide change and improvement. And even for the summative exams, the students are allowed to challenge up to 10% of the items on the exam, and that informs us, again, as we're doing our post-exam item analyses and final scoring. But student feedback is received and is welcomed throughout the course of the module, and does help guide, in addition to our student learning outcomes, does help guide some targeted improvements to the module and ultimately to the program itself.
Great. Looks like we have one more question. I'm going to go ahead and open this up for kind of a last call for questions. If you do have anything that you'd like to pose to the presenters, now is the time to type it in. The next last question that we have at this point is, we use rubric solution, or rubric assessments to assess clinical evaluations and performances. Is there that capability within ExamSoft?
There is absolutely that capability within ExamSoft. And again, ExamSoft is a rich system, and their rubrics functionality is quite terrific. For us as a program, we're not quite there. Again, we just began our third year. We began looking at and thinking through the use of ExamSoft rubrics, I guess it was late last fall. But of course, as I mentioned before, any tool is just as good as the user's capacity. We still have to develop our rubrics for use within the system, to develop the anchors and the other scoring definitions that we want to use within the system, and we're not there yet. That's something we're working on.
Perfect. I think that's going to wrap it up. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Thank you to all of our presenters, Dr. Hawkins, Dr. Otto, and Mr. Keely, for being here today. We appreciate you taking time out of your afternoon to share your experiences, and for everybody else to be here to learn and listen. Again, as you close out of the webinar, you should have a pop-up box that will have a short survey. It's only 5 questions. We would appreciate anybody taking the time to fill that out so that we can continue to provide great content. And also, just as a reminder, we will be sending out in the next 48 hours an email that will have a link to the recording of this webinar, as well as a PDF copy of the presentation deck. If you have any further questions for the presenters, please give us or contact us. We can get you their contact information. Our email here at ExamSoft is info@examsoft.com. Thank you again for your attendance. We look forward to seeing you next time.